Hi, welcome to Tag Arcade, and in today's tutorial we're going to be talking about loops. So if you like my tutorial, go to my website www.tagarcade.com and click on this nice little button on the top right hand corner. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Unity, and let's go ahead and open up our tutorial project that we did in the last tutorial. So once it loads up, we are going to create our script. So let's close my console window, create a script called loops. Now we're going to create another game object, create empty. Let's call this scripts, and let's attach the loop script to it. Once we're done, let's go to our inspector and launch this loop script. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is make sure our loop script is indeed running. So I'm going to do debug.log loops. There you go. File, save, play, and hopefully we should get loops on the bottom left hand corner, and we do. So there's our loop script. So let's go ahead and stop this from playing, and let's go back. So what are loops? Well, loops are pretty much something that you get to do multiple times in a row. So in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to create an enemy game object, and we're going to create it 5 times. So let's do it the long way first. The first thing we got to do is do public transform enemy. File, save, and let's go ahead and create our enemy game object. So let's go ahead and create, I don't know, let's go ahead and create a cylinder, and let's move it into view. So, or not into view, but let's move into position. Let's go here. Let's zoom in on it. So let's double click on cylinder to zoom in. And let's see, let's go ahead and rotate it. So let's change my view. And let's rotate it, I don't know, 90 degrees in this direction. So this could be any which way you want because it is simply your enemy game object. So let's do a cube. I'll move it back here. Let's go ahead and, I don't know, make it long this way, make it long that way, and I don't know, maybe add a sphere. Maybe we'll make it go up, make it go back, maybe make it go bigger. Come on, bigger. Okay. And since we want to create this object every time, we want to make this into a prefab. So we're going to call this prefab enemy and make this our enemy prefab. There we go. So let's click on enemy. That's our game object. And now we actually, before we delete this, we got to position it into the frame and make a note of our positions. So let's go ahead and zoom back out. So where's our positions? So let's say 45. Okay. So our position is -45. I assume at +45 our object is still in view. And let's make a note of this. So we're going to say x is from -45 to +45. What is my y position? My y position is at 1. And actually, let's make it at 0. So our y position is 0. And my z position equals, I can still see it here, 25.5. Well, we'll say 25. And let's see, if we make it 25, how does that look? Okay. So at 45, 0, 25. It's over here. Good. Hit delete. And let's go ahead and create our object. Let's go ahead and create our object and script. So what we're going to do is we're going to say instantiate our enemy object. And we are going to position it vector. And where do we want to position this? We want to position at -45, 0, 25, comma, and our rotation is quaternion.identity. So what is quaternion.identity? That just means that we don't add a rotation to it. So we're going to create an empty we're going to create a new enemy at position -45, 0, 25 with no rotation. Quaternion.identity. File save. I'm going to hit play. And we didn't assign our enemy object. So let's go to our script. We have enemy, and we got to tell Unity to use our enemy that we just created. Hit play, and we have our game object. Okay, so there we go. Now, actually, let's go ahead and hit play. And where's my enemy? So I don't like the rotation of this enemy, so let's go ahead and angle it a little bit different. Okay. So if you want to change the default identity, instead of saying quaternion.identity, let's move this over, you could say quaternion.Euler, and this is going to be, say, 70, 0, 0. So I'm just looking at my rotation here, 70, 0, 0. File save. Now we're going to play. And now our object is our new rotation, 70, 0, 0, and at our position. So let's go ahead and create this 5 times. So 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's increase this by, say, 10 each time. So let's go 35, 25, 15, and 5. File save. Hit play. And we have our 5 game objects. Okay. So now we get to add this into our loop. So the first loop we're going to talk about is the while loop. So first we're going to make a counter, and we're going to set equals to 0. So what this counter is going to do is keep track of how many objects we're going to create, or how many enemy objects we're going to create. So at the start, we're going to have 0 enemies. So we're going to say, well, let's make it a little bit more meaningful. We'll say enemy counter equals 0. So while enemy counter is less than 5, because we want to create 5 enemies, we're going to create our enemies. So let's hit copy, paste, and we're going to say counter plus plus, or enemy counter plus plus. File save. So right now we have 0 enemies. So when we have 0 enemies, we're going to create a brand new enemy. So once we create our enemy, we have to tell our script that we created one more enemy, or one additional enemy. So now we have 1 enemy. So the next time we're going to run our script is 1 less than 5. Yes, it is. So create our new enemy. So now we have 2 enemies. Once again, it's 2 enemies less than 5. Yes, it is. So let's create a new enemy, and so on and so forth. So we're going to create all our enemies until we have 5 enemy objects. So we're going to hit file play. And we have our 5 enemies. Well, if actually we look at our game object, we have a lot more than 5 enemies. I think we have 10 enemies. So let's go ahead and comment out all these enemies that we did at the very beginning by doing /* and //. So whenever you want to comment out code and not have it run, you're going to do that. /* and //. File save, hit play, and we should have our 5 enemies. Now the problem is, all our 5 enemies here are in exactly the same position, so we never even moved them. So we need to keep track of our positions and move them to the correct positions. So let's go ahead and create a vector 3, and we'll call this enemy positions. And we're going to say equal to our initial starting position. So it's going to be a new vector 3, and paste our starting position. File save. And every time we create a new object, not only do we have to increase the enemy counter, we have to make or increase our enemy position by 10. In this case, 45, 35, 25, 15, and 5. So we're going to say enemy position plus equals. Well, actually, let's do it the long way first so that you can see. Enemy position plus new vector 3, 10, 0, 0. Okay, so what this means is we're going to increase our enemy position by 10 on the x-axis, and we don't want to increase it on the y-axis nor the z-axis. So that's why we left it at 0. So we do file save, and we hit play. What? That did not do what I wanted to do. Why not? Did we did file save? Yeah, we did save. Equals enemy. Oh, I know why. We're hard coding our enemy positions as the vector 3 here. So instead of using our hard coded events of -45, 0, and 25, we're gonna say use our enemy position. So we're going to create our new enemy. At our enemy positions, we're going to define down here with our rotation. So let's hit File, Play, or Unity 3D Play, and we have our 5 objects. Okay. So when you start doing loops, you're going to do this a lot, where it's enemy positions equals enemy position plus some value. So a shorthand of doing this is we could do something like enemy position plus equals vector 3 10 0 0. So we hit file save and hit play. Our script does not run because I still need the word new. Okay, file save, hit play, and we have our objects. So whenever you want to increase something by a number, in our case our position, increase it by 10, this is a shortcut of doing it. So your your variable, in our case position, plus equals new vector 3 10, 0.0. So that is our while loop. So what happens if we change it to 0? Well, our enemy counter would be 0. So 0 is less than 0 would be false, so it's not going to do anything on my script. So we're going to hit File, Save, hit Play, and we should have 0 enemy objects right now. And yeah, nothing showed up. So if this is false, this script here will never be run, this loop function. So what happens if you do want to have at least one enemy object, regardless whether or not this statement here is true or false? So in order to do that, we have something called a do while loop. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it down here. So what does a do while loop do? Well, a do while loop will do the script at least one time regardless whether or not this is true or false. So we do file save, we go ahead and hit play. You see that we have exactly one game object, one enemy object. Okay, so that's a do while loop, where this loop will apply or run at least one time, regardless of whether or not this condition is true or false. Now we have one last loop called the for loop. So what does the for loop do? Or what's the difference between the for loop and the other two loops we talked about? Well, with the for loop, you could actually get rid of 3 lines in one line of code. So what are our lines of code? Well, we had the enemy counter that we had to start at 0. We had to check to make sure our enemy counter was less than 5, or 0 in this case. And we have to increase the enemy counter by 1 each time. So rather than do all those 3 things separately, we could do all of them at once. So we're going to do for enemy counter equals 0. So I forgot my word int. Int enemy counter equals 0, comma, enemy counter less than 5, enemy counter plus plus. Okay. And I messed up. Instead of using commas, you actually have to use semicolons. So sorry about that. Let's hit save. And now we have our 5 enemies, hopefully. So let's go ahead and run. And yes, we do have our 5 enemies. And there you have it. Those are the 3 loops. So the good thing is about loops is we get to increase this now. So here we only did 10 enemies, but you could see, let's see, when you hit play, we have about 5 enemies, and they pretty much only take up the left half of the screen. So I think the right half feels a little empty. We could do about 5 more. So here's the power of loops, is now we could just increase this to 10, and we have our game objects, 10 game objects, by modifying one line of code. And there you have it. So we have our 10 game objects. Our arrow key still works from our, I guess, conditional statement. So this could be like, say, Galaga, where we have all these enemies at the top, and they're they're going ahead and shoot our player. In our case, our sphere. So now, yeah, this is pretty much the beginning of our script. So we could move our objects, we created enemies, and eventually if we hit spacebar, we could fire and destroy some of these enemy game objects. So there you have it. This is the loops tutorial. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, have fun and keep on creating games.